Around the nation, TYD Nation, Jeff Wahlberg, here with you guys. Welcome to the show. It's impeachment day. Well, I mean, it's the first day of public impeachment hearings, I should say. Some people tend to have the wrong idea about impeachment, but that's okay. We'll talk about that. We've got some interesting video from today's hearings. That should be a lot of fun. Including Devin Nunes. This is a Republican defense. You're going to love that. And then we have Ambassador William Taylor, who testifies, and it is fantastic. Man, look, these are great stories. Very damning for President Trump and the Republicans. And you're not going to want to miss that. So we'll get to that. We also have Donald Trump owning himself on stage. That's always fun. Then we have Ilhan Omar. So now Ilhan Omar versus Stephen Miller. Who's right about that? Well, we'll get to that. Fun times on that, of course, including some email drama and drama from Breitbart. Oh, that's a very interesting story, actually. So I'm looking forward to diving into that. And then, of course, Hillary Clinton, is she coming back? Is she going to run again in 2020? Look, here we go again, right? I know I've already talked about this because she keeps dropping hints, man. She keeps saying, I don't know, maybe she's playing coy with it. And look, I don't know. So we'll talk about that as well. The newest little breadcrumb that she decided to leave to her future. So, look, interesting stuff, right? So we'll do that. That's going to be at the end of the show, but we'll start out, of course, with some fun with Donald Trump owning himself. Before we get into that, please like and share the stream. That's incredibly helpful. So like and share. We'll do some patron shout outs and some channel members, super chats later on in the show. About halfway through, as per usual. Okay, so before we get into that, a little bit of an announcement, not about this show, but if you are unfamiliar or unaware, it appears the Young Turks have made an endorsement for who they want to see as president. Well, not the company, which, again, we are affiliated. We're under the MCN umbrella, but a lot of the different hosts have different ideas on who they want to run as president. So Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian yesterday on the TYT main show made their own endorsements. And you're not going to be shocked. At least I wasn't shocked. But both of them made heartfelt endorsements towards the same person. And that would be John DeLaney. No, I'm kidding. Of course it was Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders endorsed by TYT, and so that's important. You guys already know that I support Bernie Sanders, and so that shouldn't be a whole lot of surprise here on the show. But look, there was some concern among the community that he would be going for Elizabeth Warren. Why? It's because he's been nice to Elizabeth Warren. Okay, but look, I don't quite get that, because here's the thing about that, right? So I don't know, like, I don't think a lot of people think the way that I do, because I'm like, well, you can say nice things about a politician, but if you do so, say, like, I'm like, you know what, Cory Booker seems like a very pleasant guy. I like him. It's like, are you saying you're going to endorse Cory Booker? No, I'm not going to say I'm going to endorse Cory Booker. No, I'm not in favor of his policies. I mean, not necessarily. He's got some, like, good stuff. But no, I'm in favor of Bernie Sanders. But if you say anything nice about a different candidate, then people seem to automatically assume that you support that candidate. Like, I don't know, I like Elizabeth Warren's plans on, wealth tax, etc., right? Does that mean you support Elizabeth Warren? No. It just means I like the plan and I like her, but of course I'm in favor of Bernie Sanders. I mean, it gets to the point where some people think, no, you can't say anything nice about a candidate, because if you do, you're a sellout shill, and you support the establishment, et cetera, right? It ridiculous, right? Uh, at least in my mind, I don't know. I don't know. It's a weird thing that we have in politics, and look, I've discussed it with people online that I that I respect and stuff, and I think a lot of it comes down to you know like the overreaction comes down to like we're super sensitive here on the left of getting burned, right? Not BERND, or ED, but burned, right? Like from the establishment. And so, yeah, we're pretty sensitive about that, and I understand that, and I get it, right? From Elizabeth Warren not endorsing Sanders to, back in 2016, I understand that there's still a lot of anger about that, even today. And so, yeah, not. But look, here's the thing, though. As burned as we are, and as sensitive as we are on the progressive left, we're also incredibly forgiving. I mean, just look at Peter Dow, basically Chairman Dow at this point, right? Who's made a flip from being an incredibly ardent Hillary Clinton supporter who, did say some pretty terrible things about Bernie Sanders supporters, has now flipped over completely and is in the camp of criticizing the establishment. And so that's really interesting, right? And of course, there's a lot of leftists that are like, hey, Peter Dow, right side, welcome. So that is interesting, you know. Um, but this again, this whole thing about not being able to say nice things about a candidate, which of course, look, Cenk Uygur said a lot of nice things about Elizabeth Warren. He definitely gave her a ton of chances and says that she is progressive. The problem here is that I think people hang up on that label, and this is a big issue, right? And even I fall into it. Like, we're too concerned about labels and putting people into boxes. And so I do want to avoid doing that because I think it does hurt our cause. Is Elizabeth Warren progressive? Well, what's your definition of progressive? If it includes like a robust foreign policy that is, for example, um, speaking out against a coup in Bolivia, speaking out against a coup in Brazil, and that kind of stuff, well, then Elizabeth Warren, if that's your part of your definition of being progressive, is speaking out on those issues, well, Elizabeth Warren hasn't done that. So in your mind, she's not going to be progressive. I get that. So it all depends on your definition, which isn't the same. And so it's kind of a strange thing to put things in boxes. And apparently, like when it comes to progressive, Cenk has a different, and I don't know specifically what. I mean, again, he's called out those labels as being essentially meaningless at this point anyway. And yet, of course, like all of us, we still end up using those labels, and it's kind of ridiculous to a point and all that stuff. But you know, you must have a different definition of progressive than some of the other people, right? And that includes, of course, um, foreign policy. It includes ICE, the abolition of, which I support the abolition of ICE. Elizabeth Warren does not support the abolition of ICE. And at the same time, I think my definition of progressive is slightly looser, as more of if you're trying to progress society. I mean, that's really incredibly broad, right? And it is the policies that do matter, right? Um, and so I do see Elizabeth Warren as somewhat progressive, to put her in a box. Um, but nowhere is she near progressive as Bernie Sanders, who is in another box, right? And so it gets into this whole, labeling thing, which ends up being just one giant mess at the end of the day. But I am going to say that I was expecting that endorsement, because when you look at the record, right, when you look at the record of Bernie Sanders and you look at what he's still doing, you look at how he's still fighting for us and how he's always been fighting for us, it's a no-brainer. And I know, Anna, of course, I knew understood that, but so did Jay. And so that's where I think most of his decision came from is he's got a longer record. He's got a longer record of fighting. And as long as he's in the race, he is still the best option. And so I get that. And that's where I'm at as well. He is the best option, not only because of his long record of fighting for, people like us, but also the fact that he is, and I tweeted this out earlier today, the fact that, he is the only candidate that is for real, long-lasting change. He is the change candidate. He is the political revolution candidate. And I said it earlier, Elizabeth Warren is running a campaign for president, whereas Bernie Sanders is running a movement for lasting societal change. And that's the big difference there. That is the biggest difference between Warren and Sanders. And so that's why I support Bernie Sanders above all else. All right. So I'm pretty clear on that one. All right. So let's move on. Let's go into the stories. Let's start out with Trump. We got plenty of other stuff as well for the impeachment. All right. So let's start this out. Okay.
We've got some lawless people in some very high positions. They're lawless.
That was President Donald Trump speaking at the Economic Club of New York about all the apparently lawless people all around in the government. Is he like standing next to a mirror? I feel like he should be. So, yes, the Trump administration, the very administration that is telling people to ignore congressional subpoenas, they're saying that, oh no, there's lawless people everywhere. The same administration, by the way, that's been rebuked by judge after judge after judge for trying to do unconstitutional things, especially when it comes to immigration. The same administration that involves the president, that the Justice Department has literally decreed to be above the law as long as they're in office. You see where I'm going with this, right? But no, look at all the lawless people. Yeah, I'm seeing one of them. All right. Actually, I see quite a few of them. So now, look, level of hypocrisy, right? Height of hypocrisy. This, I think, is what gaslighting looks like. No, yeah, see, we're not the lawless ones. We're surrounded by all the lawless ones. You guys are the lawless ones. We're the victims. You're not the victims. You understand how this is going? Don't believe your lying eyes or what you hear from not just the media, but the very people who work for me that are now currently testifying against me in the impeachment hearing. I mean, it's insane, right? Trump, he says he hires the best people, except for that person, that lady over there, and that dude, not the best people. Sad. Come on, dude. Really? No, you want to talk about lawless. We'll get into the lawlessness, right? You know what's lawless? Holding up foreign aid to a government in order to get them to do your personal bidding. And then saying, oh no, I was allowed to do it. Even though I didn't do it. But if I did do it, I'm allowed to do it because I'm above the law. Well, that is lawlessness. That's the literal definition. Saying that you are above the law, that the laws do not apply to you because of your position in the government is the definition of lawlessness. So now who are the lawless ones who are in the very high positions? I don't know. He didn't really go into it. He just said, well, and this is within the context, by the way, of saying, look at how many judges I'm appointing. Look at how many judges. We've got over 100 judges now that have been passed through. So, okay, we got a lot of judges. By the way, Republicans control the Senate for the confirmation process, so they're able to get these judges to go through. Okay, and what they've been doing is also look. You've got the Democrats, you've got Chuck Schumer in the Senate, who's incredibly weak. He passed through, I think it was around a dozen judges that Donald Trump had appointed in order to get to what? To get to break earlier. And that I think that happened over the summer. Oh no, so we're just going to pass these guys through. Some of them are obviously deeply unqualified, don't care. I need to get back to my district so I can raise money from rich people. That's the Democrats. So they're an absolute disaster when it comes to this. And they're one of the reasons that Donald Trump was able to get through so many of those local district judges. Some of those, like I mentioned before, are not qualified. In fact, the American Bar Association has disqualified quite a few of them and said, look, they're strictly not qualified at all. So let's go to impeachment, right? So now, here's the thing. Look, impeachment, by the way, you want to talk about lawlessness, because I think that's part of where this conversation is eventually going to end up anyway, right? So now they're saying that the process of impeachment against Donald Trump is lawless, right? Well, that's not true. Again, this is something that the Republicans also did to Bill Clinton, and they did it about the same way. But now what they're doing is that they're attacking the very same process that they themselves went through to try to impeach sitting President Bill Clinton. And look, Democrats have been more than willing to play along to the Republicans' shifting demands. For example, the demand that Democrats hold a formal House impeachment vote. They did. Nonetheless, it didn't matter to them because they said, well, it's still, since there were no Republicans that voted for it, obviously it's 100% invalid. Oh, I didn't know that that was a precondition to a political process, that you had to get Republicans on board. Well, you were never going to get Republicans on board. So it's a ridiculous talking point, right? And again, impeachment, not a criminal proceeding, it's a political proceeding. To conflate the process is to not understand what the entire process means. And of course, who continues to conflate it? President Trump. That's why you see these crazy demands of, I need to meet my accuser. That's only if you have a criminal trial. Oh, I need to have due process, which, by the way, they are going through process and they're going through the correct process. Nonetheless, I need my due process. Well, due process only applies if you have a criminal trial. I mean, look, that should be obvious, but again, it's obvious to only people who understand the process and who've actually done the cursory amount of research to get a basic understanding of what impeachment means. And the president has not done so. And again, I know he did not mention impeachment in his remarks. Again, he basically said that he appointed judges so he could keep law and order and most importantly, follow the Constitution, right? The thing is that the administration right now doesn't want to follow the Constitution. Impeachment, lawful in the Constitution. Taking foreign emoluments, as he's under investigation for, not exactly constitutional. So this whole thing is kind of a weird self-own. And at the end of the day, he doesn't realize it and doesn't realize the irony. Oops. Sad. All right. So let's go into the impeachment stuff. In his opening statements on impeachment, Representative Devin Nunes kicked off the day with a conspiracy theory-laden rant against the Democrats. Take a look.
The witnesses deemed suitable for television by the Democrats were put through a closed-door audition process in a cult-like atmosphere in the basement of the Capitol, where Democrats conducted secret depositions, released a flood of misleading and one-sided leaks, and later selectively released transcripts in a highly staged manner. Violating their own guidelines, Democrats repeatedly redacted from the transcripts the name of Alexander Chalupa, a contractor for the Democratic National Committee who worked with Ukrainian officials to collect dirt on the Trump campaign, which she provided to the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign.
All right, so that's Devin Nunes starting out, like I said, with a lot of things that shockingly are not actually true. So now he's, of course, unhinged from reality and might be having a cow. So now he says they're violating their own process, right? And so what that is, I think he's making the argument that Democrats said, well, we want impeachment to be bipartisan, which is a ridiculous thing to say because it's never going to be a bipartisan issue if you have a Republican Party, which you do today, that is, and really a Republican base that is essentially 100% committed to the president. Remember, there's a poll out there with 62% of Trump supporters say there is absolutely nothing that he could do, Trump, that would get them to not support Donald Trump, which is crazy when you think about it. But there's that majority, and the Republican base is incredibly beholden to that majority. They're afraid of that base, and look, they're afraid of the base because they don't want to lose their jobs. Let's keep it simple, right? So that's why there are nobody that's open in office to impeachment. So let's be fair about that. So now, look, in an impeachment inquiry, by the way, going to the Democrats, again, still violating guidelines or not violating guidelines. This is an impeachment inquiry, right? So now you're allowed to hold closed-door depositions in order to find suitable witnesses for testimony. They did the same thing the Republicans did back during the impeachment of Bill Clinton. So that's literally how it's supposed to work. Not only that, like I said, the Republicans were actually involved in these committees. There were Republicans that sat on the committees, and yet, of course, here you had some Republicans that were not part of the committees, basically trying to break into the closed-door committee hearings. They tried to do that, and they actually did do that, even though some of the Republicans that broke in were literally on the committees, and they were allowed to be in the room. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, not only that, but Democrats released all the transcripts. Unlike the White House, who did not release the transcript of the July 25th call with Vladimir Zelensky. No, what they did is they released a summary, a memo. Okay, there was no selective leaks. No, they released everything, all the testimony. So it's complete and utter garbage. And of course, then he goes after some of the witnesses or some of the people that were, that they want to go testify. And I've got another video on that. But in the clip that I showed you, they talked about Alexandra Chalupa, right? So the deal with her, by the way, she is clamoring to testify. She's like, yes, I want to testify. Bring me on. And remember, this is only the first day of testimony in these impeachment hearings. So it is possible that we could definitely hear from Ms. Chalupa. So now, what Nunes was trying to tie her to is this conspiracy that, no, it was her working with Ukraine to take down Donald Trump. Alexander Chalupa says, actually, no, I did the stuff. I kind of did that work on my own. I worked, yes, with the Ukrainians in order to look into Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort, of course, is in big trouble for being essentially a foreign agent for Ukraine. So kind of a different thing. But again, they're tying this into a conspiracy theory that is meant to, of course, try to paint the real people who are meddling in the elections as the Democrats and the Ukrainians. So there's that. But okay, so now the overall point here is you see from Nunes is that he is doing nothing but attacking the process, right? And that's their entire plan, because the substance of this is essentially unassailable. What you have, even from the memo or summary or whatever you want to call it, not a transcript. The real transcript's locked away in the White House somewhere. Now, what you have from that, even reading that, is a president who asked a foreign government for a favor. In fact, I want to read you some of the relevant parts of that memo. Here's Trump. He says, I will say that we do a lot for Ukraine. We spend a lot of effort and a lot of time, much more than the European countries are doing, and they should be helping you much more than they are. So, hey, man, we've been really, really good to you. In fact, he says, but the United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. But I wouldn't say that it's reciprocal necessarily, because things are happening that are not good. But the United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. Now, why do I read that? Because that's essentially a setup to what we see next, right? To this. Trump says, I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it, referencing the conspiracy theory. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it. They, of course, meaning the people who are peddling conspiracy theory that it was Ukraine that meddled in the elections, and that there's some secret server hiding in Ukraine somewhere or being hidden in Ukraine that contains the evidence of that. So find CrowdStrike, which, by the way, they incorrectly cite that company that did the research into finding out whether or not there was election interference from the Russians. They say that it was a Ukrainian company. It's actually not a Ukrainian company. It's an American company. But they say, oh, no, CrowdStrike, Ukrainian, works on behalf of Ukraine, and they hid that server in Ukraine. Utter nonsense. No proof whatsoever. But Alexander Chalupa, guys. Right. Okay. So now he also said this in the memo. Quote, the other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son. That Biden stopped the prosecution. There was no prosecution. And a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General, that's William Barr, as a head of the State Department, would be great. And then there are also various references to meet with Giuliani, talk to William Barr, getting all these different people in the State Department and not in the State Department who don't even work for the government, which, Rudy Giuliani, he's his personal lawyer. And then Giuliani, of course, had his friends, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, also working in Ukraine, going to Ukraine, looking for that dirt on the Bidens on behalf of Giuliani, on behalf of Donald Trump, so on and so forth. That's what's going on here, okay? And so all that, look, that's in the memo. And, of course, subsequent testimony from, well, I shouldn't say testimony from Parnas because he hasn't testified yet, but he plans on it. He dumped his lawyer, John Dowd, and he says, I am willing to testify that there was indeed what they call quid pro quo, what is actually extortion. Okay, so that's important. And then there's other testimony that we've seen today so far during the impeachment hearing, right? But that was, of course, Nunes's opening statement, full of conspiracy theories. So now, again, this is the memo. This is Trump asking a foreign government for a political favor, adding the fact that the U.S. was holding aid to Ukraine, which they need, of course, to protect themselves against foreign aggression from Russia, and the fact that Ukraine knew that the aid was being held up by the time of the call. That was something that I was previously unaware of, but they actually had known by July 25th, And it kind of shows that this is a deliberate case of extortion. I have the power. There was a power imbalance. So Zelensky had to kiss his ass and say, okay, yes, we will do that. We will find a time to be able to do those investigations into Burisma and into CrowdStrike, right? So now the Republicans, they can't dispute what's in the memo, their own memo. So they try to attack the process, which is, by the way, no more secret than what the Republicans did during the impeachment hearing of Bill Clinton. But I have one more video. And again, this is going to go into the witnesses and how the Democrats are being so unfair, and they're not calling the real witnesses to this, the real people that we want to answer questions. Take a look.
The Democrats rejected most of the Republicans' witness requests, resulting in a horrifically one-sided process where the crucial witnesses are denied a platform if their testimony does not support the Democrats' absurd accusations. Notably, they are trying to impeach the president for inquiring about Hunter Biden's activities. Yet they refuse our request to hear from Biden himself.
All right, so that's one of the witnesses that they want, Hunter Biden. What does Hunter Biden know about the president's attempt to inquire on or to pressure, essentially, the president of Ukraine to do an investigation into him and his dad? What does Hunter Biden know about it? Well, he doesn't know anything about it. And that's not and that's the point. They don't want to ask him about that. No, they want to say, Hunter Biden, why are you taking $50,000 a month from this Ukrainian gas company? And what do you have to do with CrowdStrike? Now, other witnesses that they wanted to see, and I'll get back to Biden in a second. Other witnesses, as I mentioned, Alexandra Chalupa and the whistleblower. But wait, why do they want to see the whistleblower? Why do they want to talk to the whistleblower? He's essentially, or he or she, I don't know who it is, they are essentially moot at this point. Because we now have first and second and third hand testimony from people saying what the whistleblower had actually reported on. So what's the point of the whistleblower? Of making them testify? Nah, the point is to punish the whistleblower. And you know it, I know it, and to distract, of course, from what is clearly extortion, which are clearly crimes committed by the president in order to help himself politically. That's what it is. But like I said, Hunter Biden, they want to ask him a bunch of questions. They want to tie him into the conspiracy about Biden going after a prosecutor who said that they were looking into the Bidens. It's not true. In reality, there was a prosecutor, and that prosecutor was pressured to step down, and Joe Biden did have a hand in it. But that prosecutor had not looked into the Bidens, wasn't looking into the Bidens, had done an investigation to Burisma 2 to 3 years before. That was even before Hunter Biden joined the board of Burisma. So there was no basis for an investigation. And besides, there was basically international consensus behind Joe Biden's push to get rid of that prosecutor, who, by the way, was not. The main problem is that they were not looking into corruption. So, look, this has nothing to do with any of this, right? So, no, this is pretty clear here that the Republican playbook is attack the process, and then throw out insane conspiracy theories. That's it. That was Devin Nunes' job. And guess what? He performed it admirably. Because now, of course, this is for a Republican audience, right? This is essentially a Republican play. So people on Fox News, they're going to watch that. They're going to watch Nunes and be like, oh, well, of course. It must be some play, political play. The Democrats, what about Hunter Biden? What about the whistleblower? What about Chalupa? What about all this stuff? So I guess well done on that one. But anybody who takes this guy seriously, I don't think they were ever interested in the facts to begin with. This is Devin Nunes' opening statement is essentially the political equivalent of throwing poop at the wall and seeing what sticks. And it shouldn't be surprising that a guy who tried to sue a fake cow would be the one to deliver it. It's utterly ridiculous. I couldn't help it. Sorry, guys, couldn't help that. Okay. All right, we got more. Sad. All right. Earlier today, the U.S.'s top diplomat in Ukraine, William Taylor, testified. So now his testimony is really important. He actually dropped a really big bombshell, something that we actually didn't know before about Donald Trump's motivations and his concerns when it came to Ukraine. See, the Republican narrative, the Donald Trump narrative, is I'm going after corruption in Ukraine. So corruption, really, really important. I want you to go after the corruption and stop that before we can actually give you that military aid. So the argument is, well, we do that all the time with other countries, when it comes to things like human rights. So why can't we do it with corruption? Okay, so now I'll get to that. But now in this next video, William Taylor, who is the top diplomat in Ukraine, described a conversation that was relayed to him last week by a member of his staff. Now, he did this during the opening remarks of his first hearing in the House impeachment inquiry. Let's take a look.
Last Friday, a member of my staff told me of events that occurred on July 26th. While Ambassador Volker and I visited the front, this member of my staff accompanied Ambassador Sondland. Ambassador Sondland met with Mr. Yermak. Following that meeting, in the presence of my staff, at a restaurant, Ambassador Sondland called President Trump and told him of his meetings in Kyiv. The member of my staff could hear President Trump on the phone asking Ambassador Sondland about the investigations. Ambassador Sondland told President Trump the Ukrainians were ready to move forward. Following the call with President Trump, the member of my staff asked Ambassador Sondland what President Trump thought about Ukraine. Ambassador Sondland responded that President Trump cares more about the investigations of Biden, which Giuliani was pressing for. At the time I gave my deposition on October 22nd, I was not aware of this information. I'm including it here for completeness. As the committee knows, I reported this information through counsel to the State Department's legal advisor, as well as to counsel for both the majority and the minority of this committee. It is my understanding that the committee is following up on this matter.
All right. So you heard that. Trump didn't care about Ukraine, only the investigations. To which I say, of course. We already knew that. But this is at least confirmation. We knew Trump was leveraging military aid in order to get those investigations. We knew that he only cared about the political ramifications of announcing publicly these investigations into the Bidens. So he could go on TV, his surrogates could go on TV, or his staffers or aides could say, oh, look at the Bidens. They're so incredibly corrupt. And that would, of course, help him in his campaign of, hey, I'm draining the swamp, right? So now we knew that, right? Now, Republicans, like I said, they argue that we do this all the time. We leverage aid, for example, human rights issues, right? But again, that's not the same thing. The corruption in Ukraine, or supposed corruption, didn't actually involve any Ukrainians, which is strange. But instead, his political opponent, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter, as well as, of course, a conspiracy theory about a secret server in Ukraine that would apparently or allegedly prove that it was the Ukrainians that were interfering in the election on behalf of the Democrats. with the Democrats. Again, all of these things would help Donald Trump politically, whereas starving the money to Ukraine is actually not considered to be in the best interests of the United States when it comes to foreign policy, because Ukraine is basically more of an ally against Russian aggression in that region, right? So now Ukraine, like I said, it's also not in their interests to have that security money held up, especially since you have the annexation of Crimea that had happened under President Obama. And not only that, right? So now one of the defenses Republicans use is that the Trump administration eventually did release the military aid to Ukraine. See, we didn't do anything wrong. We released aid. It actually came out in September 11th, so everything's fine. And look, he didn't even have those public investigations. So what's the deal, Democrats? Well, remember, Kiev didn't make a public statement, yes. However, that is because once Congress found out that the Trump administration was holding that money, well, there's a lot of pressure from both sides of the aisle. Democrats and Republicans got together and said, what are you doing? What are you doing holding that security assistance hostage? No, you got to release that. We passed that through already. By law, you can't sit there and hold on to it, right? And then we also find out that Zelensky was actually planning to make an announcement of an investigation publicly on CNN before that money was released. We knew. Once the money flowed, by the way, Zelensky, he didn't have to make that statement. So he went back and, again, like, oh, well, I got the money, so why do I need to go and make a statement that's going to look really, really bad? Remember, Zelensky's in a tough position. He can't say, no, I'm not going to do that, right? And then risk that money. And he can't say yes, because then it would look partisan, and that would put Ukraine aid in danger, which, by the way, then again, the Russians would take advantage of. So it's a very, very tough spot. But it seems to be very clear, according to Taylor's testimony, that there was extortion on the part of President Trump, that he tried to get this other country to do him a political favor in return for that military aid. And now the fact that he didn't actually succeed at that doesn't make it any less of a crime or any less bad. And if you believe that, why don't you go into a bank with the intent to rob it? You have a gun, you pull a gun, maybe even take some money, right? And pull a gun on the teller. And then in the middle of it, say, hey, you know what? Never mind. I don't feel like robbing a bank. Here, go and take this money back and just forget it all happened. Well, then we'll see if you get arrested for for robbery or not. Let me know how that works out. One more thing here. Now, Republicans, again, their defense, one of them painted as this, it's the Democrats that are putting up the Trump haters. Oh, it's the Trump haters, the never Trumpers, and so they were against me from the outset, which is hilarious because some of the people that are testifying literally work inside the Trump administration and were Trump supporters. One of them is Gordon Sondland. Gordon Sondland did go back, and he originally testified no quid pro quo, no extortion, and nothing like that. He went back and amended his testimony behind closed doors and said, yeah, okay, there was. Oops, it did happen. He also said that he was instructed by Donald Trump to say, as he did in the text released by Volker that featured William Taylor, that there was, quote, no quid pro quo. None. Just didn't happen. Now, Gordon Sondland, you can't say that he's a never Trumper because he literally gave Trump over $1 million. And in return, as it happens with a lot of presidents, he ended up getting an ambassadorship. A nice little plum position. At least until this happened, right? So definitely not a never Trumper. What about Lev Parnas? Lev Parnas recently got arrested back in October. He got arrested for setting up a shell company in order to give over $300,000 to Trump's re-election campaign. He said he'd never given to a politician before. Wasn't really interested in politics until Donald Trump. He gave all that money There are pictures of them together. There are pictures of Parnas and Fruman along with Giuliani. Parnas worked with Giuliani, wanted to set up a Ukrainian gas deal for one of his companies, retained Giuliani at Fraud Guarantee. That's his, I guess, internet security company. Very pro-Trump. You cannot say that that person's a never Trumper. Okay? And the only reason, by the way, that Parnas has decided to give up and testify is because Donald Trump threw him under the bus. Oh, that guy, Parnas, never knew him. Never met him. Don't know who that guy is, despite having, of course, pictures of them together. So now he's under that bus, along with many others who had worked in the Trump administration, who were part of the Trump administration. Again, you have national security. Well, he was on the National Security Council, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who also said, hey, look, I was on the call, and what I heard was disturbing, and so I made a report. And so I was worried about that, and I'm one of the people that the whistleblower had referenced being on the call and being very concerned about what I heard on that July 25th call. So, but no, he's a never Trumper now, even though he literally worked in the Trump White House. But see, here's the thing, right? Look, Donald Trump sees anybody who's not willing to lie for him on this as a never Trumper. Well, they're against me. Well, they're not lying for me, so they must be against me. They must be a never Trumper. They must be a Trump hater. In reality, these are officials who are, professionals who have worked for both Republican and Democratic administrations, and they were concerned. They're like, hey, that seems to be kind of illegal here. Maybe we should report it because Donald Trump appears to be breaking the law. You cannot ask foreign governments for personal favors or political favors. And that's what this is. And you have people like Sondland, Taylor, and others who, some of them, yes, might have been Trump supporters. But guess what? Michael Cohen was also a Trump supporter, and he's sitting in prison now. This is what happens. And Trump has fully turned on him, by the way. This is what happens. They look at that and they think, well, I'm not going to prison for that guy. I'm not doing this. Now, if you think it's bad for Trump now, remember, this is only the first day. And we already have incredibly damning testimony against Trump. So it's kind of likely that it might get worse. Sad. Okay. All right. Let's go to Ilhan Omar. This is a great story. / terrible. So President Donald Trump's senior White House advisor, Stephen Miller, is facing some calls to resign after a series of leaked emails showed that he pushed white nationalism, that he is a white nationalist. Now, you might remember somebody saying that. Oh, right. It was Ilhan Omar publicly saying that back in April. So now on Tuesday, the Southern Poverty Law Center published an investigative report from its Hate Watch arm, which reviewed more than 900 messages Stephen Miller sent to Breitbart editors from March 2015 to June 2016. Okay. So now the emails were given to the organization by a person named Katie McHugh. Katie McHugh was an editor at Breitbart when now she's a former editor of Breitbart. She was actually fired after tweeting anti-Muslim attacks, which is kind of an interesting thing for Breitbart to fire someone for being anti-Muslim, since that's kind of their whole brand. They're kind of the whole platform. But anyway, so now these emails show us basically what we already suspected from Stephen Miller, that he was a white nationalist, and also what Representative Ilhan Omar had publicly said. And let me give you the tweet here. Quote, Stephen Miller is a white nationalist. The fact that he still has influence on policy and political appointments is an outrage. Oh, look, that she's right. She was right then. She's been proven right now. But what happened when she tweeted that out is the right wing went berserk. They went nuts. They went after her with every single slur, including anti Semitism. Oh, well, Stephen Miller's Jewish. How dare you attack him as a white nationalist? That's because he does white nationalist things. More. Donald Trump Jr., Representative Lee Zeldin, and other conservatives went after her, calling her, like I said, anti Semitic. You had Jeff Balaban, a conservative commentator and Trump campaign advisor, saying that Omar was, quote, more dangerous than former KKK leader David Duke and Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan. Ilhan Omar, more dangerous than those people. Ridiculous. So now let's look at the emails. Okay. And these are, like I said, disastrous. And we'll kind of show you whether or not Stephen Miller is a white nationalist. This should show you the kind of message and the kind of person that he is. So now, this goes back in June of 2015, right? So now this was right after Dylan Roof shot and killed 9 black people in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, Miller was apparently upset afterwards, not because of the shooting, but because of a nationwide effort by Amazon and other corporations to remove Confederate flags from their stores. How dare they? No, but the Confederate flag is the literal flag of treason against the United States. I don't know if you know that. If you don't, you should probably read your history, and not history that was literally rewritten by people in the South. Now, Miller had emailed McHugh under the subject line, quote, defines modern comprehension. And so he was mad, obviously, and very disturbed that they were trying to remove Confederate flags. So he had an idea. He wanted to go after communist flags, which, look, I wouldn't fly a Confederate nor a communist flag. Makes no sense. But now, he said, have you thought about going to Amazon and finding the commie flags and then doing a story on that? Okay. Which I wouldn't be surprised if Breitbart had done. In July of 2015, Miller also forwarded McHugh a link to InfoWars. Of course, because they have a war on info. The link led to a story syndicated from right-wing website CNS News, which echoed Reverend Franklin Graham's statement that America is, quote, under attack by Muslims at home and abroad and should stop all immigration of Muslims. Because apparently they're so dangerous. But they're so dangerous that since then, more people have been killed by white right-wing terrorists at home, domestic homegrown terrorism, than Muslims. Wait. So, okay. Now, it gets worse, right? As if you didn't think it would. But of course it does. In a September 2015 email, Miller also recommended that Breitbart write about a book called The Camp of the Saints. Now, longtime viewers of the show know that back during this time, I think it was 2016, 2017, right? Back when Bannon was part of the Trump administration. I know, it's crazy. But look, back then, I talked about that book. I went and, in relation to what beliefs that Steve Bannon has. Steve Bannon says, well, that book is a must read to see what is happening in America right now. So that book was written by French author John Raspail, right? So now this is a book, like I said, that portrays immigrants, all immigrants, as dark-skinned, highly sexual, dirty, lazy, filthy, poop-eating invaders of white society. The hero of that book is someone that murders immigrants, shoots them. That's the hero of the book. That's horrifying. It's disgusting. And yet Stephen Miller is a man that loves it. He says, you should write a story on this. You should get that book all out there so that all of our readers, because I know your readership, they'll love it. They'll love it. One more. Now, the following month, Miller also sent McHugh a link to VDare. Now, VDare is an anti-immigration website that pushes, ironically, white identity politics. I know. The right wing is, we hate identity politics, except when it's white identity politics. Then we love it. Now, this VDare link, right, was during a conversation where McHugh was worried about refugees coming up from Hurricane Patricia. She said that it would cause a mass migration to the U.S. border, as you would expect a massive catastrophe to do, right? Now, in their exchange, like I said, Miller said that the chances of that happening were about 100%, warning that the storm survivors would be granted temporary protected status, allowing them to remain in the U.S. for a period of time while recovery took place at home, to which apparently horrified them. Oh my God, how dare we let refugees whose homes were destroyed by a storm that, let's be honest, climate change probably fueled. How dare we let them live in the United States where their homes are being rebuilt? I guess their fear is, well, they're just going to stay here now. They're going to stay here and they're never going to leave. How horrible, right? Now, Miller then shared a story with McHugh on TPS. Now, this was written by Steve Sallier, who has promoted so-called human biodiversity, or another name for eugenics. Because, of course, gross. Now, McHugh, in turning these over, again, which is a bit of a surprise for someone who seems to be incredibly racist, but maybe not at the fact that, or not as much as Stephen Miller. McHugh told Hate Watch that Miller's emails, quote, clearly illustrate his beliefs, which until now have not been made explicit and known to the American people. Now, look, maybe to the greater American people who don't know who Stephen Miller is, who don't pay really attention to this, but anybody who does has already known about Stephen Miller for quite some time. And apparently Ilhan Omar has known for much longer, because she had it absolutely right. She knew what Miller was about. She knew. Look, Miller is so bad that the big thing about him is that he has forgotten that his family had once been immigrants, right? And that he had been, not him himself, but his family and his religion had been victims of white supremacy and eugenics. His hypocrisy is so enormous that you had a family member, his uncle, ended up writing an op-ed against him. So now, there's a lot of emails, 900 that they looked through, right? Are they all hateful? Could they all be hateful? I mean, they can't be, right? It can't be that bad. Well, Hate Watch, they looked through it, and they said that they were unable to find any examples of Miller writing sympathetically or even in neutral tones about any person who was non-white or foreign-born. Because, of course, is that any surprise? Look, I don't know about you, but if a person talks like a white supremacist, acts like a white supremacist, they're probably a white supremacist. I mean, the guy came up with the idea of baby jails, separating families, Muslim ban. He's the driving force behind Donald Trump's, the Trump administration's most racist policies. Omar was 100% correct when she called him a white nationalist. We knew it before. Now we have more proof. In fact, Omar essentially tweeted that. She said, as I said earlier this year, Stephen Miller is a white nationalist. And now we have the emails to prove it. This type of racism and hatred has no place in our government. Miller needs to step down now. And she referenced her own tweet from back in April. Again, the same tweet that she was attacked by, or attacked for, by right-wingers. AOC also jumped in. She said, quote, Stephen Miller, Trump's architect of mass human rights abuses at the border, including child separation and detention camps with child fatalities, has been exposed as a bona fide white nationalist. He's still at the White House shaping U.S. immigration policy. Miller must resign. Now. So now where are those apologies from the people who attacked Ilhan Omar? People who called her anti-Semitic for attacking the white nationalist Stephen Miller. Where are they? Where are they? Well, they're not coming. They're not going to apologize because they never do. In fact, you'll have White House mouthpiece Stephanie Grisham. When asked, she decided to attack the Southern Poverty Law Center and their reporting of the emails. Because, of course, the fact is, we have a white nationalist running immigration policy in this country. And if that's not frightening to you, and we have the proof of it now, you might want to come and take a look at why. Okay. That's unfortunately all I got time for. Before we go, I want to read a couple of super chats here. I don't know why, but they're not showing up. Okay. David Richardson says, new additions for the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, the Trump baby from England, and the Nunes cow. So great ideas. By the way, I was going to do a story, I think it was yesterday, where there was a right-winger who was so triggered by the Trump baby that he literally slashed it. He deflated the Trump baby balloon. So hopefully they get that fixed if it's going to trigger these right-wingers. And then Jeanette Villalona doesn't say anything, but still, super chat. Thank you very much, Jeanette. I appreciate it. Holy crap, man. All right. We'll do patrons. We'll talk about channel members tomorrow. We'll give a thanks to them, but thank you to all those who support us. Patreon.com/TYTNation. Become a channel member. There are other ways. There's Q bounties that I still need to, of course, go through and answer those. QBounty.com. And all these different ways to support the show. But most importantly, please share. Very, very important. All right, guys. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you guys later.